What's up guys, welcome back to another video. So just to explain the situation a little bit, so unfortunately, as it seems like live streaming is just not going to work out in the near future because way too many things are just not yet ready for this new architecture. So what that means is that I kind of have to look for other ways to create content out of these tracks that I'm making. Basically what I decided to do is just to record the screen and like kind of go from there and figure out what should I do exactly. And what I already put out, that video, it's basically the whole time spent on the project, so from absolutely the start until the very finish. But on top of this, because like that video is like, it's kind of hard to digest, right? So there has to be another component to this, and so I kind of think that it would be kind of nice to just go through the most important things about the song in terms of like what the production and even the mixing process, and then like talk about these a little bit like, you know, as if it was a live stream and I would explain it or like, I don't know. So yeah, this is what I'm going to attempt now in this video, and then you know, we'll just see how this one goes. So first of all, about the concept of like creating a bootleg is like, basically you have two ways to go. The first one is, I would say, is my preferred method, which is to essentially take the original song and then try to like get rid of the low end of that original song, or like, you know, make some other type of adjustments. But I would say like in 99% of cases you want to get rid of the low end of the original song, just kind of keep the range with the melodies or the vocals or whatever that you really want to keep, and then remake the rest around it. And the other way is to essentially to think about it from a club perspective, or like a DJ perspective, much more rather. So what I mean is that you take the original song and then you kind of play it as it is and treat it as if that was the breakdown, and then you create a transition and you create a drop. In this case, the drop is pretty much going to be a new original song or like new original drop, and for the breakdowns you're just going to use the sample track. And both ways are like good, but I kind of prefer the first one because I just kind of have like a pop approach to like producing in general, and unless I'm asked to do a club edit, or like if I want to like showcase it, or I don't know, then I would much rather go for this first version, because the second one is like pretty much only suitable for like, you know, DJ use, and then it's just a little bit more niche, I would say. But at the same time, right now on Spotify, even like these new like very DJ focused tracks, you know, for example, the new David Guetta tracks are like, you know, doing pretty well, that are this future rave and whatnot. So yeah, this is just basically about the concept of like how can you approach a bootleg, and these are basically the two main ways that you can go about it. The first thing I did was to basically look for a bass line that's a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more continuous than the original, and basically it's just like oriented towards this like a little bit more clubbish vibe. Once you start playing around with side chains, and like even without that, just, you know, if you add in a kick drum or like a metronome, in many cases, especially if the track, I don't know if they like, you know, humanized the drums or whatever they did with it, probably not. In this case, I just noticed that the sample wasn't 100% on the grid, even though the vocal to my ears at least, that lined up, but the drums weren't exactly where they so the drums did not line up to my drum grid, so I had to like move the sample a little bit around. I just wanted to like talk about this a little bit. This is not super important in the grand scheme of things, but I just wanted to like include this in the video because this is a very common thing in like bootlegging. You kind of have to mess around a little bit with like, you know, to get everything 100% to the grid, and this is really important because otherwise it's like everything is going to sound much more muddier than how it's supposed to be, and you would think that it's a mixing issue or whatever, but in reality you are just off the grid with your sample track, and it's just something to like try to keep an eye out for. Now, I also decided that this is also something I usually do. Doesn't work all the time, so it's just worth trying out, and in this case it like worked out pretty well, I would say. Is that I'm going to add a ping-pong delay to the vocal range in the sample. So obviously this is ping-pong delaying the whole thing, so this is not always a great idea, but as I've said, you know, to my ears it sounded good. I just tried to like, you know, sweep around and find the vocal range, because that's ultimately what I wanted to like mostly use from here, and yeah, that's what I did. Now, I felt in the original snare hit was just like a little bit too overpowering for anything that's, you know, I could imagine, and this is something I would have done without that, I would say, but like this is 100% made up my mind that this bootleg will need a very heavy sidechain, because I just wanted to get rid of that snare hit. So I started playing around with the chords. And as I've said, the whole recording of the entire from start to finish project is already out on the channel. If you're interested, you can watch the whole 3 hours long producing session. Basically, you can clearly see in that video as well that I just tried to create some chords and do something like enhance a little bit what the original song had. So it's I will replace this synth sound a million times later on. I was just looking to kind of layer it a little bit to make it a bit fuller, because the original song didn't have enough, at least for my taste, it didn't have enough material in it, essentially. So the first time I heard this track, I felt that maybe this should have been done like a semitone higher, or maybe even 2. Because I feel that the bass is so I'm talking about the original song. Sometimes the bass is going somehow too low, and it gets a little bit I don't know, messy. It really is a great song in my opinion, at least. But I just felt that it might have been better to do this a semitone or 2 higher up. So what I wanted to try out for my edit is to do this change myself and to transpose the sample 1 semitone higher and check with how that works out. But later on I discarded this idea because it just sounded too processed, and so when you're making a bootleg like this using the original sample, it's going to sound messed up already because of it's just the nature of creating a bootleg from a whole song. So I just didn't want to add to the chaos with even more pitch shifting, even though I kind of think that a semitone higher this whole thing would have sounded better. And I mainly produce in Logic Pro, but I always have Ableton open on the side, and I basically use it as a sampler, an auditioning sampler, so that I can just go through quickly my library and then drag and drop the samples like that, and I can really quickly audition everything that I want just by going through everything super fast. And I also almost always do all my audio processing in Ableton too, so I would have it open anyway. So then why not use it like this? If I don't know already what I'm going for, then I'm just going to browse through all these hi-hat samples or even kick samples. I do the same thing in most cases. So I'm just gonna browse through them and see what fits into the context, and I'm going to add it there. Later on I also added this disco-ish type of loop, which I really like. And what I felt a little bit later on, as I was listening to this whole thing, that I wanted to give it a little bit more moving feel, and the good way to achieve this is basically to add some 16th patterns. And whether you do that with synths or hi-hats, and I will end up doing both later on, but here I just added this hi-hat on this rhythm, and I immediately felt that this is already giving it a little bit more movement than what it had previously. And so at this point I also kind of thought that I want to try out a synth here, and I decided to just take the chords from the chords that I that I already had, and just recreate it into this 16th arpeggio pattern. Later on I added a violin layer, a pad, and these violin stabs that play on the downbeats. Initially I tried to emphasize the chord rhythm so that it would come in a 1/16 ahead, just like the original rhythm pattern goes, but later on I felt that didn't work as good. So what I did there is that I just did everything to be on the downbeat 100%. Then I also added a 5th layer to it, and in general layering a 5th is usually a very safe bet. In most contexts that's going to, well, again, it's kind of an almost always rule, so I would say it's 90% of the time, but yeah, in a very high percentage of the time it's going to sound good, if you just layer a 5th to your root note. And so yeah, this is how I felt that these violin downbeats were sounding the best. As I was browsing through some presets, because I still felt that I wasn't completely happy and wasn't completely sold on the synths still, I was just browsing through the preset library in Hive, and I found this pad which had this 16th this very high chirping type of thing. Again, I just felt that it makes the track move a little bit, and so I felt that I want to incorporate this one in some shape or form into the track. And so I started playing around with it, and I would say this is the sound that gave the song the most movement in the end. One thing I felt that was maybe missing still from here is some hi-hat accents that you almost always hear these disco beats. It's they go there's always a bunch of closed hi-hats, and then there goes around the end of the bar is 2 or maybe sometimes only just 1, but there's a longer hi-hat, something like this. I wanted to recreate that type of feel. This is why I added these sounds. Around this part, I was like kind of happy with how things were sounding, and I was like, there's probably no point in trying to perfect something that I won't be able to perfect, because at the end of the day, this is a bootleg, and I can only be as good what the sample is going to let me. So I don't really want to overstuff the track. Obviously, I didn't want to leave it empty, as I've said it earlier with the synths, but I also didn't want to overstuff it. So I was like, okay, let's move on to figure out be an approximate like output chain, like how is this going to work out. And yeah, that's what I started to do here. And one of my favorite things to start out, so already I have a maximizer on it, because while producing, it's I kind of prefer to like not go above 0 dB if I don't really have to. So I just put on the maximizer already, so that I kind of have an idea of like how things will sound like when kind of being pushed. But at this point in time, it's still not doing anything other than literally just keeping everything below 0 dB full scale. But otherwise, I really like to start my output chain with a G Bus compressor, which is an SSL emulation. And what this like. So all these bus compressors have a little bit different detection algorithm, I would say, and their attack and release times are also kind of different. But that's not really the main thing. The main difference between one bus compressor and another one is their detection algorithm. So they will react to signals differently. They will like it's not only attack and release, but there's some frequency dependent things in this case as well. And the reason you want to use a bus compressor on the output especially, but like on subgroups as well, is because they tend to react to polyphonic signals better than single channel compressors. I already kind of know my go-to adjustments, and I'm just going to like adjust the threshold until I feel it's doing enough. It's not overdoing its job, but it's like a dB, maybe even 2 dBs of reduction. Like that, I tend not to push that even more. If I want more level in the end, then I'm going to push the limiter. But like as far as the compression goes, I really just want this like kind of gluing effect and this really like tightening of everything. And after this one, I did another compressor. This is also something that I do a million times, is to stack compressors. And as it's going to happen in the case of this track too, I'm also going to use before the end limiter another G Bus. I like to stack compressors because, as I've said, these are both bus compressors, and they have a slightly different detection algorithm. They sound slightly different, and I just like to use them for their own character. This is the Vari Mu compressor emulation from UAD. And not much I can say about it. It's, again, I kind of know my preference when I'm working with this plugin, so I just did it instinctually what I kind of felt that would sound good, and yeah, set it and forget it. Another basically staple on my output chain is the massive passive, once again from UAD. It's once again a Manley emulation. This is like the high-end workings of this plugin is just like I cannot really get this with any other EQ. The SSL channel strip, again from UAD, the high-end knob on the EQ comes close, but I would say still that's not as great sounding on like the overall mix as it is great sounding on these individual instruments. And like that makes sense, because this Manley unit was designed to be an overall plugin instead of just a single channel one, and the SSL channel strip is designed to be a single channel one and not a flavor on the whole mix. This massive passive, I almost always just, even if it's doing nothing else than just using the filters a little bit here and there, it's going to be present on my output chain to, like in most cases, to emphasize a little bit of the high end and give this more sparkling to the track. And especially because I felt that maybe I'm wrong, but I think the original song also has a little bit of massive passive high end, what I can tell from the sonics of the original track. So I just felt that this is going to work very well in tandem with it. And yeah, as I've said earlier, the Ozone Maximizer was already present on my chain when I started doing these tweakings, but it didn't do all that much. And so I just opened it up and see how much I can push the level without getting any sort of pumping artifacts or whatnot. And so just basically just to get the loudness that I kind of wanted to have. This Ozone Maximizer that I'm using, it's, if you set it to the Intelligent Release Control 4 settings, IRC4, then it already has a built-in dynamic EQ. But I sometimes prefer to do my own dynamic EQing, and so that kind of, so that there's two purposes. Like, first of all, obviously I want to make the track sound better, but second of all is to take a little bit of a strain of the algorithmic dynamic EQing, the limiter. So I like to dial in my own stuff, and even with low end, like sometimes I need a little bit more boost, sometimes I need a little bit more cut. Like an algorithm cannot really figure it out for me, like these types of things. So yeah, this is why I prefer to like use a separate dynamic EQ before the limiter as well. Now there were basically only a couple of things left in order for me to like be able to start with the arrangement. One of these things was to like figure out the progression of the bridge parts, because they were like slightly different, and yeah, I'm just doing that right here. It was relatively simple to to figure it out, and I then later on like figured out the chords with it, and yeah, that was it. And another thing that I kind of wanted to like, this was just an idea, and again, this is sometimes that's going to work and sometimes not gonna work. In this case it worked, and so what I did is I grabbed the original sample and transposed it 12 semitones higher, so an octave higher essentially, and I also like put on like this chorus plugin on it, so that it's pushing this effect to the sides, and I just lowered the volume until you can barely hear it, but at the same time, because everything is transposed an octave higher, it gives you this impression that the sample has more content in it than it really does, and it gets a little bit wider without sounding muddy. So yeah, this is just a trick that you can sometimes try out, and I would say it's going to work 50% of the time. That's my guess, and yeah, here it worked perfectly fine, so I left it there. At this point, as I've said, I was already pretty much happy with everything that was going on here, so I just wanted to move on to the arrangement, like figure out, like puzzle out something, and like go from there. In the beginning, I pretty much puzzled out the whole everything around the whole track. But then when I was closer to finishing the arrangement, I felt that some of these sections were just too boring and too slow, and they made sense in the radio with it, but they didn't make any sort of sense in like a more club-oriented ish type of edit. So I just got rid of quite a few sections. As I was moving on with the arrangement, I felt that the stereo image needed a little bit more work, because certain parts weren't wide enough, certain parts weren't they were overflowing. I almost always use this, at least on the output, the Ozone Imager, because I can split it to bands, and I can just listen to each of them on their own and like kind of make the decision right there whether I want it to be more or less, and yeah, that's exactly what I did. Sometimes I hear it right away what needs to be adjusted. Sometimes I need to like mess with it and listen to it a little bit. Here I wasn't sure about like what exactly I felt was off, but then later on I figured it out. I think that in the middle ranges were a little bit too wide, and the higher sections could have gone a little bit wider. So this is the adjustment that I did in this song. And as I've said it earlier, an additional compressor was added to the output chain. This time with a much slower attack and much slower. Well, it's an automatic release time, but it's going to be almost always slower than what I would set by my by my own standards. So it's a much slower attack/release style compression here. There weren't any peaks at this point, I would say, but like just so that the track is like evened out a little bit more. It's a little bit more creamy. It's a little bit more like more flowing, I would say. Like these words are like kind of interchangeable here. I'm just going for a feel. I can't really explain it. And so I was like pretty close to finishing the track. I just felt that I wanted to try out one more thing, which is to add another layer to the bass. This is basically just a serum init patch, and it has a formant filter on it. And I also used the Logic built-in tremolo plugin to like chop it up to 16ths, and once again just further emphasizing this like movement-ish type of feel. And yeah, I just feel that it worked great, and the bass needed a little bit more help in terms of like this to fill out this frequency spectrum. So yeah, I tried it out and it worked. And as you can see in the long video, I tried out many other things which didn't work, and those I obviously didn't include. If something doesn't work, okay, just get rid of it. It's this is something that worked out well, I would say, and so I kept it. Like just another thing I want to touch on, this is kind of self-explanatory, but there's some of these white noise effects that are like very subtle. They are very much in the background, but I would say it's kind of important to like, especially when you're close to finishing the track, to like just listen through everything and try to figure out if there are some gaps that potentially could be filled with something, and don't immediately rush to like add another synth or like add another like something that would like occupy a lot of space, but instead just try out some filler, white noises, some sweep ups, sweep downs, and stuff like this, because in many cases, just at very low levels, they will already like create this continuous effect for the song, just by keeping everything together. Even if it's like when you're listening, it's kind of subconscious because you don't even really notice them, but at the same time they are there, and they add to the overall value of the whole production. as far as the arranging process goes, I don't think there's a lot that I would need to talk about here, because as I've said, I was just basically following the original song's structure and then got rid of some parts. So it's not that big of a bit of a magic. So that's essentially what I did. And yeah, the whole thing was done in like, you know, a little bit more than 3 hours. And all that was left at this point basically was to color code and name the stems, and just basically to prepare the project for sharing, which is, you know, in case you don't know this, I'm on splice.com/Nalestar. You can find all of, well, not all, but like all the tracks that I didn't sign to labels, or where they give me the permission. I give away all the project files, and sometimes even the stems, presets, whatever. And this track is no exception. So if you go to splice.com/Nalestar, you will find this edit there. So the project file from Logic Pro, it's like 100% free and available to everyone. You don't need a Splice subscription. I've heard this from like 2 people in the last 24 hours that, you know, they don't have a Splice subscription. What should they do? And you don't need one. Like, this is on the community side. Just type in splice.com/Nalestar, and these project files will be there. And even if you don't use Logic, that you can still download the group stems. If someone is willing to pay for my storage, then I might even like upload the separate stems of each project, but that would just consume way too much space, you know, and I just don't really want to do that right now. Yeah, at this point, basically, I was done with the track, and all that was left is like literally just to publish the song itself to YouTube. And one thing that I learned is that the long video I will need to upload it earlier, because the processing on YouTube, especially for the high HD versions, that takes forever. Like, it took, I think, more than 48 hours to get the 1080p version of a 3 hour long video going. So I think the 4K is also going to like take like another 48 hours or something at least. So, well, that's not great. So this is a lesson that I've learned, and hopefully this explaining video is like another like kind of a nice layer for you to kind of understand the process and understand why I did what in this song. And yeah, hope you like the song, and see you in the next video.